Welcome everyone to the St. John's campus of Memorial University, both to those who have joined us in person here and also to those who have joined us live via webcast. My name is Sheila Singleton and I'll be your moderator for the next 90 minutes. I may be familiar to some of you. Before my retirement last year, I served as University Registrar and Secretary of Senate. Today, my job is to keep this town hall on time, keep the discussion moving, and facilitate a respectful dialogue. And I know you're all going to make that easy. The format for today is straightforward. First, I'll introduce our speakers who will take you through a presentation of about 30 minutes. Then we'll open the floor for questions and answers for the remainder of the session. I'll give more information about that when we get to it. I'd like to point out that this is a Memorial University community event, and so we are asking that there be no audio, video, or still photography during the session. The event will be published online tomorrow afternoon. So our three speakers today are Dr. Gary Kachanowski, President and Vice Chancellor, Dr. Noreen Golfman, Provost and Vice President Academic, and Mr. Kent Decker, Vice President, Administration and Finance. I'll ask Dr. Kachanowski to get us started.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Welcome, everyone, to this important meeting for the university community. Before we begin, however, I feel it is imperative to address an emerging issue. Many of you may have heard media reports from several local media outlets late yesterday quoting Minister of Advanced Education and Skills Gerry Byrne regarding Memorial's financial reporting. He said that we provide factually incorrect information to the Canadian Association of Business Officers, CAUBO, and Statistics Canada, and that we need to revise and report. These are serious allegations that call into question the integrity of the financial administration of the university, and that we believe are completely unfounded and not correct. Let me be clear. I have complete confidence in the integrity of our professional financial services team, and I think that providing clarification to the university community today is important, and that's why I'm asking Kent Decker, Vice President, Admin and Finance, and Debbie Collis, Director of Financial and Administration Services, to speak here this afternoon first before we get into the other part of our meeting today. Kent and Debbie.
Thank you, Gary. I'd like to begin by assuring the community that Memorial's reporting of financial data to CAUBO is accurate and in accordance with national standards. Debbie Collis, our Director of Financial and Administrative Services, and I are charged with that responsibility. I will ask Debbie to review the process in a moment, but at first I want you to know that Debbie has served for 6 years on the CAUBO Financial Reporting Committee and chaired the committee for 3 of those 6 years. The role of the committee is to set the standards for reporting for all Canadian universities, including the definitions of how specific items are to be reported. She is considered an expert in these matters. Debbie, please.
Thanks very much, Kent. First of all, I would also like to reiterate that our CAUBO financial reporting is accurate. So I'll just give you a little bit of a breakdown as to how the process unfolds. Our CAUBO reporting begins with our audited financial statements. So we start with those statements, and then we apply the CAUBO financial reporting guidelines, which are very prescriptive and tells us how to report different aspects of our operation. We report our information in various schedules, and then we actually reconcile those various schedules back to our audited financial statements. And all of that information is provided to CAUBO. They in turn review it, and they'll ask us some questions if they have any. Then they will send it to Statistics Canada, who thoroughly vets the information. And they will ask us, or any other university, if they have any questions about trending, variance analysis, and things such as that. So then Statistics Canada will put together the information, and it's published online and available to all of you. It's important to know and to understand what that CABO information is meant to be used for. It's really meant to be used for a long-term statistical analysis, a trend analysis, and using it for other purposes could appear to be misleading if you don't understand how the data is put together and what it's meant for. There's also a general caveat at the beginning of the CABO report, and I'm just going to briefly read that. It's just a couple of sentences, but it puts it into context, and it says, certain data in these reports are subject to interpretation or clarification because of inherent differences among institutions in size, academic programs, organizations, physical environment, management philosophy, and budgetary and accounting procedures. Interregional comparisons must also recognize differences such as various sources of funding, fiscal year-end dates varying from March 31st to June 30th, and different reporting procedures requested by provincial authorities. Comparison of similar reports from previous years should be done with caution due to changes in the guidelines which govern the compilation of these data. So I think that's a critical item to have in your mind when you're looking at the CABO data. So I can say with a surety that with my experience with CABO and my knowledge of the CABO financial reporting guidelines, that we comply with those guidelines. And I think that our reporting is one of the best in the country when it comes to that. Finally, I'd like to say, and as a whole, that Memorial's financial reporting, I think in all respects, is beyond reproach. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kent and Debbie. And of course, given the serious nature of the matter, we won't be answering questions about this particular topic during the town hall. Won't be doing media interviews about this. If we get on to today's meeting, in the midst of all of this, of course, we are dealing with some serious budget issues, and that is why we set up this town hall meeting today, and I think it's important to turn our attention to that issue. As you will remember, last year we were given a multi-year budget forecast from government that included reductions in our grant in each of those budget years. A great deal of work by senior academic and administrative leaders has gone into looking at how we could address that known shortfall, and you'll hear more about that from Kent and Noreen in just a few minutes. Then, 3 weeks ago, when the provincial budget came down, we received further reduction of $6.5 million in our grant for the current fiscal year that began on April 1st, and guidance for cuts, additional cuts for later years. That is a significant amount for Memorial to either cut budgets or generate revenue, and it has meant that all options have had to be explored so that we can start to address the renewal of our old and deteriorating infrastructure, so that we can maintain and improve the quality of our programs and allow us to continue to deliver on our mandate. Kent and Noreen will now take you through the current financial picture, the actions taken to date, and the options being considered, all of which have been the subject of discussions at the Senate Planning and Budget Committee meetings and the special Senate meeting, of course, that was held just a few days ago. Then, of course, we will be happy to open up discussions on those presentations.
Thank you, Gary. So let's begin. Let's start with a budget update, which is essentially the summary of the budget we received from the province this year. I'll just turn around for a second. The 318 is the budget from the previous year. To that, we've added the $1.586 million adjustment for salaries and benefits from MUNFA collective agreement. So we sign collective agreements in accordance with the government template. If we do that, the province funds those agreements for us. So in this case, there was a 0023, I believe it was. That's in its last year. The government is providing that money to us. We will provide that money to our faculty members as part of our collective agreement. It flows through our books. Grant in lieu of a tuition freeze. This is an item that's been there for many years. We will get $4 million in the current year for that purpose. The next item you'll see $2.7 million is reversal of one-time grants from the previous year. In the previous year, government reclaimed money that we had put away from some capital projects, most notably the daycare center at Grenfell. So government reduced our budget last year, we gave the money essentially back to government. They put it back in, so we're back to where we started. It's not new money, it's replacing money that was there year before last. Then we come to the grant reduction line, the $5.4 million, which we knew about in advance of the budget. And then the new item, the $6.5 million additional cut in the current year for $11.9 million. So the $11.9 million less the $4 million. Of that $8 million is basically the amount of the cut for the current year, to which we've got to add known inflationary increases, such as the increase in contributions on our pension plan, which all of our employees, I know you all know that since December you've had extra 1% taken out. The university has to match that 1%. So we're looking at an extra cost of maybe $2.5 million in the current year. So we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $9 to $10 million as a shortfall in the current year. Let's just go back to the previous year. It's not like we're starting fresh. Last year, we had a budget grant reduction of $8.3 million. The $1.1 million of pension contributions that got added to our costs starting in January this year, and we were given a $3 million attrition target. So we had to come up with $12.4 million in the year that just finished. How did we do it? Well, we had the $4 million grant in lieu of tuition increase. We reduced our staffing by $3 million through this process to accommodate that $3 million cut. We then did administrative budget cuts of $4.1 million. Administration, no matter where it appears in the university, we did an allocation against it. And we did a general travel reduction across travel in the university of 1.3 to come up with a 12.4 to achieve a balanced budget. So a trying year from many respects last year, going into a more trying year this year. If we look at the cuts that we've been made throughout administration at the university in the last number of years, the cuts are in dollar value in the first column, 1.6 for the president's envelope, down to 3 million in my envelope. The percentages of the expenditures in the envelope is the second column. So as you can see, the president's envelope has been cut 13.6%, mine and the research envelope 6.8, coming down to 3.9 at Grenfell campus, 2.9 at the Marine Institute, and 2.5% for the academic envelope. So the academic envelope has the smallest percentage, but the largest individual amount because, of course, it's the largest expenditure group at the university. This doesn't include things such as inflation. Library holding inflation is running about 15% a year on $7 million worth of purchases. You all know about the cuts that we've had to take in our online journals. And you've seen some of the coverage around that, how many thousands of journals have been discontinued in order to balance the budget. We've been doing that. HST, 2% increase to current year, $2 million on roughly $100 million of supplies in total. These numbers don't include the attrition, which is over and above that. So you can add another $3 million to that as well. So if you look at the cuts year by year, we've come from $3 million in 12-13 up to $12.5 million in the year just ended. And potentially, without additional revenue, a jump from 12.5 to 21.9 current year. It's a massive increase. Now, the $4 million partially offsets that. So that is a partial offset. But it's a significant increase in the cumulative cuts. We talk about staffing at the university. I'd just like to refer you to this table, which shows the active members in our pension plan. Memorial has a lot of staff, come and go, short-term, et cetera. Our real base staff includes people who are part of our pension plan. If you work at the university for 6 months or more, you are mandated to be part of our pension plan. So this really gets at the true number of employees. You can see from 13-14, there was some growth. We received funding from the province to expand the Marine Institute. We had received money to expand engineering. We've received money back at the early parts of this period to expand Grenfell campus. What you will see as we get into last year, 2016, 2017, we've actually reduced our employee numbers by 93. The large cuts you'll see in the middle of the table. You see CUPE and non-bargaining 44, and I saw our CUPE executive here, somewhere around here. There they are. You understand? We understand. We've been working with CUPE and trying to work our way through that. And senior and middle management reduction of 46. So the cuts have been truly on the administrative side of the organization in terms of the reduction in staff numbers. One exception there, I think, is probably the CUPE members. I think there were CUPE members of the Math Learning Center, which was closed out. So in total over that period, we're down 60, but again, we've been ramping it up last year. And that process continues. It's fairly quiet, but it's continuing. This is the item that's been causing some consternation in the media. Cost per student. And it's cost per student versus expenditure per student, which are two totally different statistics. So we heard, I guess, through the media that it was being quoted that Memorial at a cost of $31,000 per student. We had some concerns with that number. First of all, full-time equivalent university students don't include Marine Institute students. They are college students. They don't fall within the Stats Canada definition of a university student. Neither does all the industrial response training that they do. They do anywhere from 7,000 to 9,000 courses a year all around the province. They range up to 14 weeks long. They are not considered students, according to Transport Canada, or I'm sorry, Statistics Canada. They are Transport Canada courses in some cases. The other part of MI that's in there that makes things a little odd is they do a lot of commercial work. You're all familiar with the Flume tank, the bridge simulators, the other simulators they have. They sell those services. So the costs of providing and selling those services does not impact the cost of educating students, but unless there's some recognition or removal of those costs, they get allocated to the university students that are there, which is inappropriate. And normally you wouldn't bother if these items were small, but the Marine Institute campus spends $50 million a year. It's a massive number. It impacts all the rest of the numbers. Faculty of Medicine, we have salaried physicians that are funded at the med school. They're funded through the Department of Health and Community Services, as is their operating budget. There's $25 million of these people. They provide 20% service to the university for teaching and learning purposes. The other 80% of their time, they see patients. So there's hundreds of thousands of patient visits a year covered off by that $20 million. We believe the average Canadian university is not a valid comparator to Memorial. We're not an average university in Southern Ontario. And the other issue we have there is the data is from 2015. So we've had some pretty significant budget cuts since those numbers were calculated. So what I've done is I've moved forward to 2016. We've taken the expenditures per FTE university student, and you'll see it's broken down by campus. It's $467.5 million. We've taken the FTE university students, which amount to 15,405. And if you were to divide those two, which is inappropriate, you would get 30,351. And you'll make note of the Marine Institute. They only have 202 students because they have a small number of BTECs doing courses online, and they have some master students. All their regular students are excluded. All their industrial students are excluded. So obviously, if you want to get to a cost per student versus expenditure per university student, you make some adjustments. So we've added in the regular students at MI, and Glenn has done a conversion of contact hours on his industrial clients to come up with 1663. So we've redone those numbers on that basis to come up with what we know is not completely accurate, but a more reasonable number for the cost of a student at Memorial. And it's about $26,000, which is probably, you're thinking, that's still a lot of money. Yeah, it is a lot of money. Is everybody clear on what we've done there? I can break it down this way, and this is how I told it to someone the other day. I said, if you go to the grocery store and you've got $3, you buy an apple, an orange, and a banana. You come home, and Stats Canada says, how much money do you spend on groceries? You say, $3. How many apples did you buy? You say, 1. That's where Stats Canada ends. It didn't cost $3 for the apple. You spent $3 and you got 1 apple. That's essentially what we're adjusting for here. Stats Canada is not recognizing the other kinds of students and services. So where do we sit with comparable institutions? We believe we are in an environment similar to Dalhousie, very similar size. The other university in here that's similar to us in many ways is Saskatchewan. UBC is larger. Again, they have significant costs. Calgary and University of Alberta is in there. University of Alberta, as many of you know, is trying to become one of the top-ranked universities in the world. Obviously, spending a fair amount of money on a per-student basis. Well, we believe that the cost at Memorial is reasonable given the kind of university we are. We have an entrance average of 70%. Some of the ones you see in the low end, Western, is 85% entrance average. Our class sizes for first and second year are in the low 40s. Someone like Western, it'll probably be 80 or 90. You have classes, first year classes in rooms like this on a regular basis, where we have what we would consider more normal classroom sizes. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, Memorial's always prided itself in having a fair number of faculty members per student. We think it provides a quality education. That's maybe up for debate. So let's have a look at Dalhousie, because you've also heard the comment of the level of support for Memorial versus Nova Scotia universities. You can see that we receive 87% of our revenue from government grants, 48 million, or 11% from tuition. Dalhousie is $213 million from government grants, $152 million from tuition. So there's a $104 million difference in the amount of tuition we collect compared to what Dal collects. They receive a commensurate less amount from their province. We don't believe we need to be where Dal is in any way, shape, or form. But in our university, the taxpayers of the province are contributing the lion's share of the cost of education. There's no doubt or question about that fact. We compare ourselves here to other universities in Atlantic Canada. And as you can see, the cost of education at this university is shouldered about 10% by students and 90% roughly by the taxpayers of the province. It's different across Atlantic Canada, as you can see. If we look at grants in all the 4 Atlantic provinces, you'll see that here it's 402 and 51 tuition. PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, the ratios are significantly different. And as you can see, Nova Scotia is almost at that 50-50 point. Transparency. We do recognize the need for transparency. And we are looking at ways of expanding our financial reporting on a regular basis. That's currently in the works. However, in the meantime, I draw your attention to the fact book. The fact book contains a multitude of information, including all of our financial and statistical staffing levels across all units in the organization. It's online. Please go have a look. Our audited financial statements, as Debbie references, are available. We have a president's report. We respond to atypical requests, 108 last year. We're subject to the Public Sector Compensation Transparency Act, otherwise known as the Sunshine List. That work is being done. That'll come out in July. And the Transparency and Accountability Act, which we report to the province on as well. So there are a fair number of mechanisms there. Just a second. Excuse me. So what are some of our particular challenges? This one is no surprise to anyone sitting in this room. Deferred maintenance. We used to get up to $10 million a year from the province. That's been completely eliminated. We get zero. So what we've had to do is take monies out of our operating fund to cover off deferred maintenance, because we cannot continue to operate without fixing some of the major problems with our roofs, our windows, our transformers, our wires, our plumbing, you name it. Our facilities people are quite familiar with this. We have what's called a Facilities Condition Index. It's a national measure used to determine the quality or the condition of your space. So we hire an external firm to come do that work for us. The levels are in the index 0 to 5, excellent to good, 5 to 10, good to fair, 10 to 20%, fair to poor. The target for the university is 12. We are at 28.5. So we're not trying to be excellent or fair. We want to be somewhere between fair and poor. That'd be a good place to be right now. We're nowhere near there. So the estimates are $22.5 million annually for the next 15 years, just to maintain, just to hold us where we are, to keep us south of poor. We would have to invest $45 million a year for 15 to get us to that target of 12. But we don't have that money. The province doesn't have that money. We are mucking along as best we can. I do put a shout out to our facilities people who are trying to keep holding this together here. We've got some people who are working pretty hard. One of the alternatives is to construct new, where investment in the old or reinvestment doesn't make sense. And the core science facility is a perfect example of that. There's nothing we could do with the existing chemistry, physics building or science building to make it modern, safe science facilities. It just can't be done. We're better off constructing new facilities. We all know that. The university community knows that. The total deferred maintenance required is $445 million. So we're in the $500 million range. Our total assets in this campus alone are in the $3 billion range. IT infrastructure, more examples of where we have infrastructure problems. Our data center, we're going to go dark on July. We've got a tender out now, don't worry, we won't go dark. We've got to find $650,000 to add additional storage. Our network, we need to spend $2.5 to $4 million. Most universities are running 1,000 megabits or 1 gigabit to the desktop. They're moving to 10 gigabits. Ottawa is at 100 gigabits. We are at 10. So Ottawa is 100,000 times faster than we are. We need to spend some money on our networks. And many of you in the room, especially your researchers, you know this. You're familiar with it. We've had cases recently where researchers have had to download data on the media and courier it to Ontario rather than try to send it over our networks. It's faster. Email filtering and spam. We're using open source technology. We need to spend money on a real system. So let's talk a little bit about impact on units as we go through here. So this were our reductions, as you can see, in absolute amounts. I'll just remind you of where we were, $12.5 million. In addition to inflation, and again, library is a big one in there. The cost of elevator maintenance, the cost of maintenance on our HVAC units, all those things. They're all costs that we have no control over on a regular basis. Insurance has gone up. Tax on insurance has gone up. So this is what we've been doing lately. These were cuts to the admin functions. So my portfolio, $58 million. Basic infrastructure, so our energy, water, insurance, snow clearing, maintenance contracts, et cetera, $18.5 million of that. So everything else, $36.8 million of salaries and $2.3 million of expenses. So the expenses are cut to the bone, as you can imagine. Each and every position is reviewed and scrutinized on a regular basis. The largest portion of our expenses, obviously facilities. Try to keep the place going. These are power engineers, electricians, plumbers, custodians. The information services, again, these are people who keep our networks running. These are people who fight off the security threats. These are people who manage the databases. HR, finance, and chief risk officer, including CEP. Interestingly enough, the budget for all of those three is roughly equivalent to the cut we're facing this year, combined. VP Admin Finance, my office. There's 4 of us, and we have 3 people in budgeting. So again, pretty lean shops all across here. Any cuts we make, and I expect we will make some cuts here, but they will have impact on services. I'm now going to pass it on to Noreen, who's going to take us through some items on the academic portfolio budget.
Okay, thanks, Kent, and welcome back, everybody. Those of you who were at Senate on Monday, special meeting, will have seen some of this. We've obviously added a couple of slides or tweaked a few since then, but the gist of it is the same. This is the lion's share, of course, of the university budget, as you've already seen. So to speak to what context we're in this portfolio, as Kent mentioned, we had received the forecast for the reductions to the university and worked out, of course, what the reductions would be in my portfolio, in the envelope. And of course, this is following on those years of successive cutting, most of it absorbed by administration. We've been doing everything possible to protect the integrity of our academic programming, our staff complements, maintaining our standards, our quality, our appeal as fully as possible. I think we've done that, and I think we're proud of having done that. But we're at this moment where that's no longer possible. So we have absorbed $4.8 million since 2012. That's a lot of money. And as I say, academic units have largely been protected. It's the administrative functions, staff have shrunk, and various services have been trimmed. So now we're at this juncture. I'm speaking here largely about the St. John's campus, which is again the lion's share of our academic budget. But I have to say that there's a lot of complementarity, overlap, bleeding into or between our other campuses. So the services that we supply students, School of Grad Studies services the entire university. Various offices that, IT, libraries, all kinds of administrative functions and support services that are really invisible in some way. There's a kind of tacit cost sharing or tacit expense that comes out of the St. John's budget that carries over into those campuses. It's the way we do our work, do business. The planning exercise, as all the deans in this room and associate deans know well, that we engaged in was in anticipation of future years, knowing what our reductions were as of last year, trying to plan before April 6th, before the budget came down. And we were working with what we commonly called our worst case scenarios. So we allocated out of our office after much discussion what the effect would be on the units proportionately both across the board, and went to those units where there's declining enrollment, factoring in for the first time those numbers. And that's an agreed upon formula, I might add, by the deans, having worked on it for a couple of years. Never anticipating we'd be at this moment, by the way. Nonetheless, a planning exercise. So over 2.5 days, the deans presented their scenarios of what would have to happen in their portfolios with no revenue, additional revenue, and in view of the reality of the cuts we're facing up to 2020. So that overall reduction was 8, still remains that piece of it, 8.9. In the base, not one time, in the base, so faculties and schools would be bearing 5.3, and the academic support units that include the library, registrar's office, student life, on and on, 3.6. The projected impact on the complement based on the plans in the absence of any tuition revenue before the April 6th budget, before the 6.5, and excluding the $3.6 million in attrition, half of which we've already coughed up in positions. So our departments are shrinking. There's no doubt about it. That projected impact meant 4.6 million reduction and a roughly 33 positions here by 2020. That's on the faculty side. You have to understand that the faculties in most of the units in the departmentalized faculties and in the faculties in general have about 98% of their operational budgets are devoted to salaries. There isn't a lot left over just to run programs. So it's salary. That's the guts of those budgets. And in the permanent staff complement, 3.1 million reduction, estimating about 51 positions by 2020. And there, the salary piece comprises 75% of those support unit budgets. So what's at stake? MUSEP in student life, take one obvious example. Communications staff, development staff, helping faculties advance, recruit, get funding from the private sector, grants crafters, just to take some obvious examples. I don't want to call them low-hanging fruit because they're essential to the way we operate, but that's what you're looking at when you're looking at non-fixed costs. I don't want to steal all the thunder from the discussion later, but the Dean of Music very cogently, very forcefully at the Senate meeting, those of you who were here, spoke to the impact on his faculty. School of Music is literally going dark because the entire lighting grid, the lighting system in the performance halls, if you've been there recently, you would know that. It's not your eyesight. It's actually dimming, and we can't afford to replace them. Can't do it by the each, you got to do the whole system. He has no money to do that. The Dean of Humanities, Social Sciences, who's here standing in the back of the room, lots of seats here, Lynn, for you, talked about folklore, challenges of one of our blue chip programs, one of the only two in North America of its kind, attracting grad students from all over the world. 5 positions, I think you said, that 4 positions, only one of which can be filled. That's where we are, looking out to 2020, just to give and the obvious examples and the most potent ones that were expressed on Monday. So what are the effects of faculty complement reduction? Larger class sizes, as much as we can do at Memorial, because our physical structure never was really conceived to handle 200, 300 person classes the way I was taught as an undergraduate at other places. So as much as that's possible, because we would have reduced staff complement, faculty complement, more courses, and this is what I said on Monday, this is the brutal and bitter contradiction in all of this, is that relying more on contractual, sessional, per course faculty, teaching faculty. That's not what we want to do. We want to have a more regularized, permanent complement. But that's where we have to give up for the budget. As people retire, you close those positions. Reduce capacity for grad studies growth. If you don't have the supervisors and the researchers, well, obviously that's going to have a radical effect on grad studies. Longer time to completion rates. What if you can't deliver your programs in a timely fashion? So you've got to stagger that delivery. Might take longer for students to complete. And program accreditation, which is very serious, of course, for the professional schools that depend on national accreditation, in some cases international membership on those committees, ensuring that schools of social work, of nursing, of business, have, in fact, all of the compliance variables in place to be integrity informed, to be programs that match with any other university, self-respecting university of its kind in this country. So of course, accreditation would be at risk. If you don't have the right complement, you don't have the right space, And we're already at the edge in some programs with warnings and all kinds of anxiety about what will happen to pharmacy, for an example. Animal care is another piece of all of this. Research effects. Well, this is only 3. It really is a very modest list to try and capture all of that. So reduced research output, Memorial, until there is a direction among all of us that we don't want to be doing research at a high level anymore at Memorial University, we are committed to enhancing our research capacity. That's why most faculty want to come here. And there would be reduced research output. Right now, for instance, Ray Gozine in the VPR's office and I have been challenged to find $320,000 in startup fees. That is an expectation of incoming scientists, entry-level scientists, researchers, top researchers in 5 units now in science faculty, because they expect anywhere from, depending on their field, $20,000 to about $100,000 to start their labs. We are looking at each other wondering, how is that going to happen? Where's that money supposed to be coming from? Reduced grant funding, it follows, and research revitalization. If you're not really feeding with younger researchers and you're not animating, obviously, your research area, your research activity. The potential effects of staff complement reduction, fewer staff supports for program delivery, our reduced capacity to provide critical services to students, our reduced capacity to fulfill operations management mandates, ensure compliance management, includes research, ethics, et cetera. Maximize development opportunities would be reduced, and manage and maintain infrastructure. Of course, we can't say that enough. The whole infrastructure challenge is very intimately related to the whole teaching, learning, research enterprise, needless to say. So where do we go from here? Well, the discussion has been as public as we could possibly make it within the community, so as not to be conceived, as we have been in the past, as somehow in a cabal modeling some horrible imposition. We've tried to have this is why we're here today, as open a conversation as we can. How do we face the reality of these consequences that are upon us right now? So there are 4 buckets, really 3, that are easier to take on in the short term, just because of the nature of these buckets, so to speak. So the first is a general tuition increase. The second is a campus renewal fee. Many, many universities of our size and larger have it. It's called various things. Infrastructure and technology fee, because technology, as you heard what our demands are, is part of that. Student services fee, we could call it student support services, the whole basket of demands that students understandably put on the institution to supply state-of-the-art counseling, wellness services. Students have asked for this. Most students haven't asked for tuition increase, but they certainly have asked for services for wellness. And of course, everybody knows that most universities in Canada of our size and larger, and some smaller ones that have professional schools, have a differential fee structure where, say, an MBA, which is probably the biggest share of market potential, charges as much as, I don't know, the Dean of Business is here, $35,000, $40,000, $45,000, $70,000 for executive MBA. I mean, this is not where we want to go. But given where we are, what is the potential to break out the professional schools to allow what can be born by the market that would allow us to deliver those programs with integrity? And not only just to cover our costs at the moment, but to go forward to be the memorial that we all want to be part of. Not just putting Band-Aids on stuff, but planning for the future. Because otherwise, we're just spinning our wheels in a kind of, despair. So we have just an abbreviated version of what's been widely circulated, certainly at Senate, kind of two-pagers that break out some of this stuff. But for the purposes of this discussion, a general tuition increase, we've been talking about a 16.3 increase because we know that could get us in part where we need to go. That would be an increase for both undergraduate and graduate programs, but as you know, because of government policy, legislated policy, students from this province would receive a form of rebate to negate that. That's been the guarantee of this government. And the $4 million, right, to cover it off. The projected revenue, assuming static enrollment, even while our undergraduate population is declining slightly, our grad is continuing to increase, about $3.2 million. And this gives you an example of the programs, how that would work. So that's the annual tuition projected with a 16.3 increase. That's about $147 a course. This slide is very compelling. This gives you, in very stark visual terms, what the difference is between Memorial and other Canadian universities on average. The blue line is not Memorial. That is the rise in domestic undergraduate tuition beginning, I think the graph says, 1999, 2000, taking us up to 2718. If you look at that little lip at the end, that is the projected amount that would go up in tuition based on a 16.3 increase for non-Newfoundland Labradorians. So look at that gap. That blue line keeps growing, of course, year by year with inflation, HST, and all the other tuition increases that other universities have imposed. And I think, as Kent said, we don't want to be like Dal. We don't want to go there. But what is the tipping point that we can bear here to keep Memorial whole and to advance Memorial? And another version of this is the international undergraduate tuition story, 1999 to 2017. And again, you can see there was, of course, an increase in 2002, I think it is, or 12-13, of course. And then we've been steady since. And looking out to 2017-18, you see that little rise at the end of the bottom bar. That's Memorial. Again, you can see the gap between us and the rest of the country, which we've been proud of. Another version of this. So the dotted lines, the two dotted lines, are the Canadian averages. The top line is the international. The second dotted line is the Canadian average domestic. And then you see the two Memorial. The blue line is Memorial International and Memorial Domestic. Canadian. Oops. Campus renewal fee. Well, you've heard the story, you're living in it, the plant's falling apart, pick a building, any building. Purpose of the fee, it's self-evident, revitalization of this pathetic physical plant we are inhabiting. And technological infrastructure that we need for research, for teaching. This is 2017. We have a tiny fraction of our classrooms are smart. Fee would apply to all students except grad students paying continuance, because at that point they're not reliant anymore on the services as much, anyhow. The annual fee, about $450 per student. You can benchmark this across the country, pretty common, goes up higher in some places. Based on $45 a course for undergraduates, and because grad students pay by the program, it would be $150 a semester. Projected revenue, assuming static enrollment, $6.5 million. Student services fee, large areas here that fund would be directly tracked to. Okay, I know there's some mistrust about that. Would be directly tracked to. Professional development, career advising, lots of demand on the system for that for our students. We rank lower than average every year on the National Student Survey in this category. Our students complain that we do not provide them with enough professional development and career advising. It wasn't even a concept when I was an undergraduate. That is the reality now. Health and wellness and that whole basket of needs around that, which we support, and advocacy and support. $50, we guesstimate what we really need is about $65. We're sawing it off at $50. And it includes internationalization student needs as well, that we know are greater in some areas. Projected revenue from that, assuming static enrollment, is $2.3 million. I've already spoken about the differential tuition by program. We're not quite ready there yet to be proposing anything, but it's on the table, at least in the abstract right now. The deans of the professional schools will be convening soon to talk about best way forward. Probably wouldn't be one blanket proposal across the board for the schools. It would be based on perception and knowledge of, evidence of those market differentials across those professional schools. And there are questions to ask about that. When do you grandfather? When do you kick it in? What do you do? I mean, all of that is part of it. Certainly, we can't entertain any new programs in the professional schools without fees attached to them. Cannot do that, because we would not be able to cover our costs, and we obviously don't have a coffer to draw on anymore. So that's the end of my presentation, and I hope lots of time for questions here. I'll pass it over to Sheila, I guess. Okay.
Thank you for sharing that important budget information with the university community. It's obvious that a lot of thought has gone into the impacts and the options for Memorial. I should point out to people that the presentation that we've just had has been posted on the Provost's website, and a link has gone out via Newsline this afternoon for that as well. So people will be able to take a look at it if they want to review some of the information. It's a lot to take in. I'm also sure it sparked a lot of questions, which we'll get to in a minute, but first just a few important notes for participants. First of all, for those joining us remotely, you'll see an email address on the portal where you're viewing the webcast. You can submit your questions or comments via email, and we'll get to as many of the questions submitted as possible, assuming the topic has not already been covered. We may not get to all of them, however. When submitting a question, please include your name and university affiliation. Are you a student, an employee, an alumni? What's your campus? What's your constituency affiliation? That email is being monitored in real time, and questions will be read aloud in the room over here. Next, for those of you in this room, we have 2 microphones that have been set up in the aisles, and people can come down and speak. Please don't speak without being at the microphone, otherwise our online participants won't hear everything that is happening in the room. A 3rd microphone, as I mentioned, is here for the online questions, and what we're going to do is rotate through the 3 microphones in turn. Finally, recognizing that many of your colleagues will want to speak, please keep your comments and questions brief and concise. If you begin to run long, I may interrupt. And to be fair, we will only take 1 question or comment per person until everyone who wishes to do so has had an opportunity to speak. That way we can maximize the opportunity for as many voices as possible to be heard. I'll ask the panelists to respond based on your question or comment before we move to the next person. Again, for people in the room, remember to state your name and affiliation with Memorial before you begin. And on that note, if people want to come down to the microphones, we're ready to start. Can we move one of them? Or you could always use the mic over here.
We can get a mic to you.
No, I meant in general.
Yeah, if somebody needs one and can't get to the room, we can run a mic to you.
Okay. Great. So we'll start over here.
Hello.
Oop.
Hello, my name is Emma Lang. I'm a PhD student in the much bedraggled Department of Folklore, though we're very proud of ourselves. We're just slightly under-facultied right now. I'm also an international student. I am the classic cash cow. I'm an American. I'm a native speaker. I don't really need a lot of services. I volunteer in the International Student Office, and I'm actively involved in the community and want to stay in Newfoundland and Labrador or Atlantic Canada if pushed because of no jobs after I graduate. However, I have a very simple question. My funding this year, and will be for the rest of my PhD for the next 3 years, is $11,000. I am ineligible for Tri-Council funding because I'm an American. I'm ineligible for Fulbright because I live here. I'm ineligible for conference grants to any conferences that are based in Canada because I'm not a resident. I'm ineligible for most conference grants in the US because I live in Canada. Basically, I am, excuse my language, but I'm screwed. There is no funding for me. I have applied to the small grants so I can piece together about a couple $1,000s a year. So I just have a simple question for you. With the tuition hike last year, my annual income is $6,585. I don't think that you can rent an apartment, even a room, even a closet in St. John's for $200 a month, but please tell me if you have one. I want to know how I am expected to live here, because I know there are lots of PhDs and MAs and BAs in this room, and I can guarantee that most of you did not have to live on $6,000 a year and buy vegetables. So please, tell me, how am I supposed to do this? Thank you.
Emma, I can't tell you how to live on that. I don't know how anybody lives on that, but I will say what I didn't say here, and it's obvious certainly to the School of Grad Studies, and that is that there is enormous pressure on our fellowship budget, which has stayed pretty static by student over the last, I don't know, I was a Dean of Grad Studies, hasn't changed since the time I was a Dean of Grad Studies. Went up slightly, I think, in my first or second year as Dean. We're quite conscious of the fact that we are falling behind on fellowship support. That much I can speak to. Whether or not that helps you or not, but in general, certainly, we know we have to be more competitive. We want to attract graduate students from all over the world. We've got to be able to support them. Where's the money going to come from?
I don't know, but I want to add one quick thing. The international students as a body use the campus food bank more than any other group, since we don't have any other options. So if you don't increase fellowship, I can guarantee that the international students who you have recruited so heavily, we will drop out, we will leave, and we will not send our countrymen and people from programs that we graduate with our MAs or high schools there. So I just want to state that there is no question in my mind. It comes from people from all over the world.
Thank you very much. Over here next.
Yeah, I've been going door to door.
I don't think you're actually speaking into the mic. If you could just,
Oh, God. Sorry.
there, no problem now.
I didn't mean to break it up. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can I put it back? Because I might do that. I got post-traumatic stress. I can drop that mic thing, right? I would do that. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, so I've been going door to door, and I have over 3,000 signatures from both provincial and federal with a petition that some have been read in the House of Assembly, but because it didn't fall between a particular form, and I took the word prayer out of it, the possibility of those names on those petitions meaning nothing to federal government is very strong. We've got a lot of petitions right now that are going around on electronics that are not doing anything with our government. The reason why I'm bringing this up, it all comes back to the individual. I see all of these big numbers there and a lot of money that's not going to be taken out through faculties. Some of these jobs or positions should be an opportunity for us to be able to use MUN and its rooms as it's closing down to provide programs to people that are out there in the real world, meaning we need places for our children with autism to go. There is ways for us to be able to take the space, the actual dimensions of rooms, and be able to use this to broaden the education system across the province. Instead of closing it off in this defragmented style, which it seems that from what you said, you present numbers based upon what the province might add or ask for, and that's how the faculty salaries had grown to 98% with just 33 positions. That's a lot of money. That's an opportunity for us here in Newfoundland to be able to rechange the education system to fit with what it is that people want and need. I think the same old status quo on how education is brought out has left us in a generational gap, has left us in a point where people such as myself can't fight back because we don't have the written capacity, and those were from MUN students that were in our classrooms. That we do have teachers that are talking about inclusive education, but there's also people that need to talk about how the teachers and some of the participants from past MUN have been watering down our education system and has gotten us into this financial crisis that you have put yourself in. So again, I guess my question is, do you not feel that this would be an opportunity to be able to sell MUN to the international stage in a different manner to bring more revenues in here with people such as this woman, to be able to offer them work contracts, future ones, to be able to reduce our government expenditures? I think, was that clear? Okay.
No comments? Okay. Thanks. Now we'll take an online question, and Jennifer here will read it out for us.
Yeah, I have a question from Anthony Adey, International Student Recruitment Officer with Grenfell Campus. He's asking if tuition and ancillary fees are increased to offset the deficit, will revenues from these fee increases be allocated according to the campus in which they were collected?
Yeah, well, thanks. The answer is could be. I think all the revenue comes in. We want to make sure that we continue with our multi-campus model. Our vice presidents sit at Vice President's Council. The revenue comes in and the revenue shared where the needs are. And again, we also have to track where the cuts are going to come from and how those are going to be allocated. So I'm not trying to be nebulous about that. It's just the question of how are the cuts allocated also versus where the gaps are in any revenue that might be generated if revenue is generated.
Thank you. Up here, and please remember to give us your name and affiliation. Sure.
Hi, I'm Riza Umali. I'm currently a master's student in medicine, but I also did my undergrad here. So during my undergrad, I paid almost four times the amount of a domestic student in terms of tuition fees. And if this 16.3% hike happened when I was an undergrad, there was no way I could possibly continue my education, mainly because Memorial was my only chance of getting any form of university education whatsoever. So I just kind of want to ask, so last year, graduate students experienced a 30% hike in tuition, regardless of whether we were international or domestic, and residence fees went up as well. So it's just fairly interesting to see that last year, when this 30% hike happened, there was no town hall similar to this capacity that took place. We weren't asked, student voices were not on the table. I just wanted to know, so the 30% increase in tuition for grad students and residence fees that happened last year, the 10% I think that happened for med school students, with that given amount of increase in money, where are the improvements in infrastructure and services coming out of that additional money? I also just want to echo what my colleague said. Our funding is set, so adding to last year's tuition fee hike, that would result in graduate students almost getting a pay cut in their stipends of about almost 50%, with that whole campus services, campus renewal fee, whatever it is. So graduate students are already struggling to get by. We contribute so much to this university through teaching, through research. We bring so much to Memorial, so this is a kick in the teeth. Yeah. That's basically it.
So the 30% increase is a $400 increase. So let's just make sure that we know the absolute dollar amount of that. It was a $400 a year increase in tuition. So we increased graduate tuition last year as a result of budget cuts 2 years ago. Government came to us and said, we've modeled that if you increased graduate tuition by 30%, that would generate $2 million in revenue for you. So we're cutting you $2 million. You can do it or not. So we did it, and we paid the bill off, which means we paid it against a cut. And the residence fees that went up was the same calculation from government. Government came to us and said, we estimate, as you have, that your residence fees are not covering the costs of delivering residence housing. We did an analysis of the resident housing costs, calculated what those costs were, and agreed that the amount of money that we were collecting in residence fees for housing was not covering the costs of providing the housing. And government had done the calculation as well, and government cut us, I think,
It's 2.3 million.
2.3 or whatever, I think it was 3 million. And so the residence fees went to cover that cut. So that's where it went. It went because government calculated those costs for us, said, if you raise that, then you can cover this cut. So they cut our base budget. And they also in that year, said if you increase undergraduate international student tuition by 3,000, going from 9,000 a year to 3,000 a year, then you can generate another $3.5 million. And so they cut us $3.5 million and said, but you can choose to increase the fees by that amount or not. We chose not to do that. We chose to take those administrative cuts. And so in that year, along with additional budget cuts, we did not do the 3.5, even though we got cut, and the others went straight to cover the other cuts. So that's where it went.
Can I just add one last thing?
Very quickly.
Memorial has been crumbling even before those budget cuts. So where was all the maintenance when we had the money? And that's it.
Thanks.
Whatever money we have, we spend.
Next
Hi.
question.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Sofia Descalzi. I come from Grenfell campus. I'm a student there. So I have more of a comment/question, starting for really how convenient it is not to answer the provincial government claim of the lack of transparency that Memorial has been facing. Since most of the numbers we see in the presentation come from those doubts and that lack of legitimacy. So really disappointed there. And we cannot expect for students to cover the revenue coming from public funding. First of all, that's unethical. And second of all, the province doesn't agree with that. We know from a poll, I sound like a broken record now, but from a poll 2 years ago, that 85% of Newfoundland and Labradorians not only support a tuition freeze, they support free education. So we have to answer to them. No, I take that back. The senior administration has to answer to them as to why they blow their salaries, as to why the search committees that take hundreds of thousands of dollars, that when we did have the money, they were not invested in infrastructure and in programming and in attracting students the correct way. And now, as I am an international student too, and I am being treated as a cash cow, but I am about to graduate, so I was able to avoid this crisis. But what are you going to tell to students who are international students who are in their first or second year of studies, who have budgeted exactly for 4 years to go to this university? If this tuition fees go up, if these ancillary fees are implemented, and they have to go to their home countries where their credits are not going to be accredited in their local universities, what are you going to tell them? How are you going to answer to them that you wasted 2 years? You wasted thousands of dollars of families who saved for years to send their children here to populate the area and have a better future.
Thanks very much. We'll now move on to the next online question.
This question is from Michael Piercy with Technical Services at Memorial. With our budget being cut and efficiencies having to be found, are job cuts part of Memorial's plan to help reduce spending? If so, how many jobs will be affected and where will they come from, i.e. upper management, middle management, facility, admin staff, technical staff?
Well, I mean, as you saw, we are obliged because of government policy to offer over $6 million in salary costs. The envelope that the government gives us, the block grant that covers salaries, has shrunk. It's very clear government wants us to be smaller. So that is happening. There are jobs, there are contracts that have not been renewed. There are, I guess Glenn Blackwood would say, there are people being laid off at the MI. As people retire, and there's a sizable cohort of people who are in the retirable pool now. I think we have 27 people who are 71 years old and over. As those people leave, obviously very serious consideration is being given at the local level, wherever those jobs are, about the feasibility of replacing them. Most likely not, in most cases. So and we are doing that on top of the attrition obligation.
Great. Thanks very much. Over here next.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Omar Mohammed. I'm an international student studying computer science. And my question is very simple. I've seen last year that you've increased tuition for graduate students by 30%, and now you're doing that again. And I'm not seeing any difference in the university. So how can you guarantee for me that when I get my fees increased by 16%, that will not happen again next year and that I will see change? Because frankly, I'm just not buying it anymore. Thank you.
As I indicated to you, last year's tuition fee was directly modeled against a government budget cut, went to cover the cut.
Thank you. Over here next.
My name is Hans. I'm an alumni. I've got both undergrad and graduate degrees from here, and now I work here on campus. And I'm still paying off my student loans from those degrees as well. So I've got a comment and a question. First of all, a comment on those figures around cost of educating a student that we saw earlier. And I think it's important to remember that regardless of whether it's $31,000 or $25,000, that's a highly contested measure that really doesn't accurately reflect the costs and benefits of educating students. It throws in tuition fees, but what it omits is the economic value that students bring to the province outside of their tuition fees. It omits all the spending that students do while they're here, the investments they make in housing, shopping, the various taxes they pay to government. It also omits the economic activity they generate when they stay in the province and create jobs and bring all those skills to the labor market. The example was given of apples. Students are not apples. They're the future economy of this province. And the fact that they're being treated like apples, is what, by the administration, is what's jeopardizing the future economy of this province. Secondly, and this leads into my question, there's a lot of talk about President Kaczynowski's salary. And obviously it's important not to become overly fixated by a single salary. But I think the reason so many people dwell on the $500,000 salary and perks is because it's very symbolic and symptomatic of a broader culture of entitlement and spending at the senior administration level. It's the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. And I think people are worried that if university spending can authorize and normalize that kind of excessive salary, what other spending practices are being normalized? Students and labor unions as well on campus have been trying to put together a picture of university spending through ATIP requests and the like. And some of what comes out in these requests is really disturbing. There's just drawing from some of the hosting and catering expenses, $300 dinner for VP Academic at Portobello's, a $200 dinner to review a Board of Regents meeting agenda, dinner between the VP Academic and Deputy Provost at Magnum & Steins for $200, a dinner meeting with panel review team at Bacalao for $750. In a 2-year period between 2014 and 2016.
Hans, maybe you could get to your question.
Yep. But just to contextualize that, in a 2-year period between 2014 and 2016, Memorial spent over $1 million on corporate headhunting firms and search committees, jobs that can easily be done by people currently on staff. Meanwhile, we have lecturers here on campus who don't have health care because the university won't give it to them in bargaining, and they're forced to do GoFundMe campaigns for critical health care. So given all this, It's natural that students and the public are skeptical when they hear a bunch of vice presidents and deans who earn between $150,000 and $500,000 a year claiming that they need to take more money from the poorest people on campus in order to make those poor people's lives better. So my question is, given all the concerns around transparency and accountability of decision making, given that we've been hearing that these fees are supposedly going to improve the student experience and provide services that students want, are you willing to do the tried and true democratic thing and put this to a democratic vote for students to decide whether they believe you and are willing to pay more fees to a university whose spending practices have come under this kind of scrutiny?
I'll comment on your first comment about the value of students and their economic impact, and Wade Locke is here, and we did that study, and we put those numbers out exactly because of that. And not quite fair on the Apple piece. That was meant to explain the differences between the interpretation of Statistics Canada in a way that understood how you would do the averaging, in fairness, right? Okay? I mean, we don't budget by referendum. We budget by budget process that's well set out. And so the answer is that's how we will continue to budget.
Thanks very much. Our next online question, please.
Liza Ann Tucker, a supervisor in the Faculty of Education, is asking, given the political climate and our devastating cut in funding, could we scale back the science building in the short term until we are in a better financial position?
I guess I would ask the Dean of Science to answer that question, whether he wants that building or whether the science faculty want that building. My answer is absolutely no. It's the highest priority for the university and has been for some time. It was presented in a campus infrastructure plan that went through Senate. Senate endorsed it as the highest infrastructure priority for this university. We've got 20th century labs being put forward for 21st century science teaching. And given the deferred maintenance and everything that's needed on that building, the kinds of repairs that we have to do, and the impact that happens when the roof leaks and comes down and floods various labs and equipment, the liability of not doing it is just simply too large. But Kent?
No, I would agree. It's, as we talked about with the quality of our facilities, one of the things we need to do is to replace facilities that cannot be rehabbed. What we found was when we tried to fix some of the labs in the existing buildings. There's one in the old science building in particular where we put in modern air handling. What we discovered when we put in modern air handling is that the smell of fumes in the rooms actually got worse. What was going on was the floor drains had corroded. The chemicals had leached into the ground and under the floor. It ended up costing us about $1.5 million to trench floor, dig it up, bring the thing back up. So one room was in the neighborhood of $1.5 million in cost. We can't, and then we still had the same room that we had from 1963 or whatever it was. So we need to replace some of these facilities with new facilities. They just cannot be rehabbed into modern research and teaching space. Thank you.
Thanks, Kent. Next up here.
Hello, my name is Carrie Neal. I'm a Newfoundlander. I'm doing my master's here in sociology, and I just did my undergrad in economics. So I'm well aware of our fiscal crisis, and I'm hoping to get a good education so that I can afford the heavy tax burden that is being levied on my generation. My question is similar to Hans. I would like to know why our university is spending millions of dollars on headhunters, and why our president feels that he is worth more and should earn more than the Prime Minister of Canada.
I'm only going to say that my salary has been public right from the first time that I was appointed. I'm competitive with other presidents' salaries across the country, and my salary was visible for everybody during my renewal process at the end of my first 4 years for my renewal into the second years.
Do students vote on that renewal process?
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question.
Sorry, this isn't like an awkward position, so I'm like a little bit tall. So my name is Matthew Butler. I'm from the United States as well. I'm not here necessarily willingly. Like with some international student stories, I can't get in-state tuition in my home country. The reason being is because I had a medical condition that I had operated on 10 years ago. In about 4 months from now will be the 10th anniversary. Also, what's also the 10th anniversary is because of all these financial stresses and because of my status. My girlfriend of 10 years, who also moved here with me, I actually can't marry her, not even legally here. But anyways, besides that, first I want to thank you, actually, for sitting here and being roasted. I mean, I'm sorry. I think it's worth it to take a little second out of the questioning, the questions and answers process to actually say that. I really do appreciate every single one of you in front of here. I hope others feel the same, just taking it. But to my question, and just so I could give a little bit of information, regardless of numbers, tuition amounts, and whatnot, some students here, whether they be Canadian, and I urge everyone in the audience and up front to please not, to not mistaken me. When we start to get into the questions of residency and international status or whatever, we tend to lose we begin assuming things financially. And I'm sure the three of you up there could agree that, there's just a business norms that you begin to assume things. And that assumption that I'm worried about and concerned about is residency and also loans is really what I would say. Not all of us here, including Canadians, are eligible for student loans, believe it or not, because of certain statuses. I am ineligible for student loans. One of you up there actually is a little bit more familiar with my situation. I'm not trying to bring that into the fray, but the reason I'm denied student loans, U.S. student loans, and I can't get the same student loans, and other Americans in this room can also attest and know someone who, who's in this situation, because of my medical condition, I can't get student loans. I have to pay for it completely out of pocket, unfortunately. Some of the other, to move it away from the spectrum here, and just to get to the question, let's look at Newfoundlanders, and we're talking about differential tuition based on the province. Obviously, this is still just a rebate right now, but this is going to be a pretext of charging differential tuition like Quebec does to Canadian citizens. So my question, finally, I'm sorry to give you all that information, do you plan on proposing any sort of policy in place to protect Newfoundland residents from being accused of things of not being a Newfoundland resident for things such as diabetes, brain tumors, cancer? The state of Maryland allows Canadian students after 8 months of living there to get in-state tuition, but I can't because I'm a U.S. citizen. Foreigners can study in my home country, but I can't, my home state. So my question is what protections, if there is differential tuition, do you offer to Newfoundland students? I know that has nothing to do with me, but I think it's a very big question to be asking that a lot of these folks are not aware of. And I ask you to look at some of the examples across not only this country, but the UK and the United States as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I can take a crack at it. I do know Matthew. Matthew, thank you for the question. There's no history here of people being denied any benefits or any advantages to being a Newfoundlander because of any illness or any form of illness that somebody might have. I believe it's a different situation than it would be in the United States, in particular with regard to medical insurance. Thank you for the question.
We're getting pretty close to 3:30, so let's try to get through the people who are standing at the mic so we can hear what they have to say. And given that it is getting late, let's try to be quite concise in our comments.
Okay, this is from Dion Flores, a student. Living in Newfoundland and attending MUN for the past 2 years, I've found the cost of living to be at times unbearably difficult. Is there a way to strengthen and invest in student social services to generate revenue for the school, but also provide much needed relief on students' expenses? Uses examples of strengthening accessibility and advertisement of the campus food bank, reinstituting car share, and establishing subsidized or free bus pass.
Okay, thank you. Here.
Hi, my name is Sophia Solomon. I am the incoming Director of Finance and Services with the MUN Students Union. I think everyone is aware that Newfoundland has a huge population crisis, and we need an aging population. So we kind of do need a huge population of youth coming to this island. That would mainly be international and out-of-province students, of course. So international students pay 4 times the cost right now. There is hardly any jobs available for them, and even if we do get a job, we can't work more than 20 hours per week. The cost of living here is huge. We cannot afford groceries, even if we afford $10 a day, that's still $300 a month, and we do not have that. We have no access to student loans, and the cost, and it's just really hard to just get through the front doors of Memorial University. And I understand that there is a $12 million cut from the provincial government in our budget, and we just noticed that the science building just resumed its operation, and Memorial University has invented $200 million towards this building. And my question is, like, if there's $200 million being invested in the budget towards the core science building, and there is just $12 million of a cut, why is it that international students and out-of-province students are mainly targeted and being cash cows to come up with that $12 million? And as my friend previously stated, like, if 30% went up last time to graduate students, and that was just to plug a hole in the budget, how can we be sure that this is not going to happen again this time?
I guess I can talk a bit about the science building. The funding for core science building was carved out of the operating budget to be used to pay a mortgage over multiple years. So it's not as if there's $200 million available right away. We are losing money, it's true. We have been asked by the province to maintain the tuition for Newfoundland and Labrador students. It is I guess the taxpayers of the province who pay the lion's share of the education here. So we have very few options. We've been through a significant period of cuts, of administrative cuts, as you can see. We're probably entering a period of academic cuts. As Noreen has gone through, as shown you, we'll probably end up losing a fair number of faculty members in support positions. At some point, we have to balance the budget. We're legally required to balance the budget. So our choices are hard. We recognize that. However, we've got to put together the best potential package of recommendations that we think we can to help guide the Board of Regents when it makes the decisions as to how we should go forward. So it's not about we cut this or cut that. I think everything is going to see, everything will bear a cost as we go forward. The question is, what's the appropriate balance? That's what we're trying to achieve here, is a balance.
Thank you. Over here.
Hi, my name is Ladan. I'm also an incoming director. I'm the incoming director of campaigns for Munsoo. I'm from Ontario. I'm an undergrad student here at MUN. So my questions are, have you taken equity into account when coming up with these proposals? Because a 16% increase across the board doesn't look equitable to me. This proposal will make it impossible for students from out of province, specifically Ontario, who rely on student loans to attend. As it stands right now, tuition, recreational fees, health and dental, books, rent, flights, and phone bills, we spend up to about $8,836 a year for 8 months, which leaves us with $1,164 for groceries for 8 months, because the maximum amount of student loans we receive when in Newfoundland is $10,000 if you're from the lowest income bracket. If fees are implemented, the average low-income student will only have $194 for 8 months of living. Our student loan applications open up May 20th and are due by July 20th, which means we won't get the money from our home province to be able to access education here. And having taken this into account, if these fee increases go through and are implemented the same time the Ontario Grants-Based Program is implemented, which would result in Ontario students having free education, what would keep us here at MUN? There's nothing here to keep us here. In addition to that, I understand In addition to that, I understand that this sink is shipping and that we're in a dire state, but are there efficiencies to be found? Why are students being forced to repair an institution that benefits everybody, including faculty, staff, and administration, and the community? Why aren't we all pitching in to fix our home before it collapses? Also, why should we invest in infrastructure and brick and mortar when the university does the bare minimum to make the institution physically accessible for students with disabilities? And last but not least, the $450 annual campus renewal fee proposal in comparison to the $50 student service fee proposed highlights just how important our student services, supports, and success means to you and to this institution, because to me it means it doesn't mean anything to you.
Comment? No. Okay, we'll take one more question at each mic. We're hitting the 3:30 time, so please be very brief. Go ahead.
All right, I'll keep it short. My name is Lisa. I'm in the Master of Public Health program, and I have one simple question, and that would be, what food is at home in your cupboard and in your fridge? And how are you addressing the rates of student food insecurity with this proposal? Student food insecurity across Canada, across multiple universities, has found to be about 39%. And that's an estimate of what it could potentially be. We know that populations at risk are international students, those universities that pay more, such as Dell, when they're over 40% food insecure. So how is this policy going to address those facts?
You know, there's no answer to that. We don't want to be in this position.
We also want to eat, so I'm just saying.
Yeah.
What
we
are
all
we
want
going
to
to do?
Okay, we'll move on to our last question.
Yeah, my name is Chad Bell, and I'm the Capital Deferred Renewal Program Manager with Facilities Management. So I handle the university's deferred renewal program and manage the various projects within it. So just to kind of reiterate to what Ken spoke to, I think it's important to hear it from someone who's down kind of in the trenches, so to speak. Sorry, hear me?
And speak a little louder into the mic, maybe, that's all.
Thank you.
There we go.
I'll restart just so everyone can hear me. So my name's Chad Balla, and I'm the Capital Deferred Renewal Program Manager with Facilities Management. So I handle the university's deferred renewal program and manage the various projects within it. Saying it's a challenge to develop and plan the deferred renewal program each year is an understatement. As Kent mentioned in his presentation, just to maintain the existing condition of the university's infrastructure, we need to spend approximately $22.5 million a year over the next 15 years. The deferred renewal program has only recently been receiving about a third of that funding every year, and as of 2 years ago, has been fully funded by the university with nothing coming from government. So part of the process every year in developing the deferred renewal program is meeting with the various operation and maintenance shops and determining the priority of the top priority projects from a list that contains approximately $455 million in deferred renewal projects, and that's a number that continues to grow. As I'm sure people can appreciate, it's tough making decisions such as what buildings leaking roof or windows will get replaced this year when there's numerous that desperately need to be done. Secured annual deferred renewal funding will enable FM to better plan and execute the program and projects. At the end of the day, the university's infrastructure must be maintained to facilitate continued education delivery. When students graduate and become alumni, they should feel proud knowing they helped to ensure that the campus is well maintained and functioning as it should for the students following behind them. Therefore, I'd like to voice my support for a campus renewal fee for each student. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and attention, both here in the room and online. It's certainly been an enthusiastic and robust discussion, and we've heard a lot of different comments this afternoon. Thanks to Dr. Kaczynowski, Dr. Golfman, and Mr. Decker for making themselves available today, and to the team who organized this event. The materials from today, as I mentioned earlier, the presentation and the discussion here in the room and from our online participants will be available online tomorrow. A link will be sent via Newsline and will also be posted on the Gazette. Thank you again, and good afternoon.